Now, the United States is reportedly pressuring Japan and Australia to make clear what they will do if it went to war with China over Taiwan. This is a pretty remarkable thing to be doing, because the official US position is that it won't say what it would do if China invaded Taiwan. It might militarily intervene, but it might not. So while holding on to that so-called strategic ambiguity, whilst demanding unambiguous disclosures from other countries, for ones who used to consider themselves US allies, well, it's strange. And coming shortly after US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could be imminent, it raises a number of questions of what the US thinks is going on and what it intends to do about it. Now, this apparently comes through the instigation of Undersecretary for Policy Colby. Yes, that's the same person who not long ago was announcing that America was reviewing its AUKUS nuclear submarine agreement with Australia to check that it was America first enough. The possibility that it's now occurred to the Trump administration that it might indeed need the help of allies. Well, that would be a pretty groundbreaking revelation. Colby is reportedly seeking to convince Japan and Australia that they need to prepare for a potential war. We knew already that America had been pushing everyone to spend more on defence. Indeed, the Japanese recently cancelled attending a trade discussion after someone in the Trump department suddenly upped the figure the US was pushing Japan to spend on defence from an already stretching 2.5% overnight to an eye-watering 5%. And who was that someone? Why, yes, also Colby. The move from pushing for more spending to demanding commitments relating to possible war, that is a huge leap, and one that raises all sorts of questions about the sort of discussions that are happening in the Pentagon right now. The obvious question would be, how on earth could Japan or Australia develop clear plans when they have no information whatsoever about what America's own response would be, which would affect those plans? They also can't really depend on the Europeans being around. It was Colby as well who told the Europeans to get out of the Indo-Pacific, focus more on their own region. Something they might need to do. Why? Well, because Colby, again, took the decision to block American weapons to Ukraine. A decision that Trump did eventually reverse, to be fair. One official from the Pentagon, not Colby this time, told the Financial Times that it had received positive indications from Japan and Australia on defence spending, but added that it was critical for us that we see the results. Daddy Trump is marking their homework, it seems, alongside hitting their economies with major tariffs that will inevitably mean that it's even harder for them to spend lots more on defence. All of this could be simply background noise intended to focus the attention of the Chinese to dissuade them from moving on Taiwan while Trump is still in office. Xi Jinping had told his military he wanted them to be in a position to carry out an invasion on Taiwan by 2027, which is not, by the way, the same as setting that as the deadline by which time that exercise should actually take place. You'll recall that when Trump and Xi Jinping spoke by telephone recently, they agreed that the American president would visit China sometime soon. The prominent Chinese scholar Wu Jinbo told the South China Morning Post, Trump has to clarify the US position on this very important issue when he comes to China. Without that, I don't think his visit will be successful. If he wanted to avoid war, he suggested he would stress that the US supports China's peaceful reunification. Wu added, Trump is a smart guy. Yeah, when that's the preamble, you know that everything following that sentence is the sentiment the speaker is kind of hoping that the person in question will be flattered into believing. He knows how to make a big deal for the sake of US national interests. He will say the right thing when he is in Beijing. Yeah, but saying the right thing isn't wholly playing to Trump's strengths, let's face it. Now, not that long ago, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was telling CNBC that Trump was, quote, confident that President Xi will not make that move during his presidency, meaning Trump's presidency. This is the whole notion that Trump has about people not starting war if he's in the White House at the time. The question on that score becomes, why not? What would Trump actually do about it if they did? Would the man who only moved against Iran after Israel had already exposed it as weakened, would he really take on the rather large, modern and highly motivated, even if not battle-hardened Chinese military? And would he do so in less than ideal circumstances? Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, recently suggested the most likely Taiwan attack scenario would come side by side with an attack by Putin's Russia against a NATO member. The purpose being to keep the US attentions divided, make it more likely that it will choose not to intercede in the South China Sea. Admiral Samuel Papero, commander of the US Indo-Pacific Command, recently said that China's military pressure on Taiwan had reached a, quote, a rapid boil. In other words, a 300% annual increase in activity with the goal of intimidating Taiwan and practicing the scenarios for how it would actually take the island. He said that the People's Liberation Army is stretching their legs to meet that 2027 goal set for them by Xi Jinping. The bigger question would be whether Putin would be in a position to strike a NATO country by then to play his part in that scenario. If it were demanded of him right now, it would simply not be possible, so bogged down he has become in Ukraine. But Mark Rutte again said that this could change within 5 years. Let's not kid ourselves, he said. We are all on the eastern flank now. That would suggest such a scenario could not take place before 2029, which is in the safe zone as far as Trump is concerned. But now here you have the Pentagon pushing Japan and Australia to be ready, which suggests that there's certainly no complacency on that conclusion. Maybe they have intelligence to the contrary. Another indicator is the story from a month ago that the Trump administration is working to ramp up weapons sales to Taiwan, hoping that this will also help to deter China from making an early move. In addition, the US is directly pressing members of Taiwan's opposition parties not to oppose the government in increasing defence spending. The current aim is to increase that spending to 3% of GDP this year, which again is a pretty remarkable example of the United States going deep into interfering with the politics and governance of others. Pressuring government to government is one thing, pressuring the opposition parties, that's something else. Some journalists interpreted this move as indicating that it was a positive sign, that Trump was committed to defending the island. Kind of isn't, though. I mean, it's not proof of the opposite either, but there is a strong case to be made that Trump's basic position is to fend off the emergency at all costs, dissuade Xi Jinping from taking action until Trump isn't there to deal with it anymore. It's not as though President Trump is famous for thinking or even caring about the long term. After all, it was Trump who suggested Taiwan should pay to be protected by America, at the same time as accusing it of, quote, stealing American semiconductor business. And hence Taiwan is, alongside the rest of the world, scrambling to fend off Trump tariffs that would partially cripple their economy while asking it to spend more on defence. So while Xi Jinping definitely has his heart set on the reunification of China, it's very clear that Trump has a significantly less fixed view of what he wants. While the Pentagon may be signalling its readiness to respond the moment something happens, and indeed may be pushing its allies to line up alongside it, I doubt the smart money would be on that being anything more than a bluff, at least while Trump is still in office. But as Trump said when he boasted, almost certainly lied in fact, to sponsors in 2024, telling them that he'd threatened to bomb Beijing if Xi Jinping moved on Taiwan, having done the same for Putin on Ukraine, he said that they told me they didn't believe me. But he said they believed me 10%, and 10% was enough. I would suggest that 10% is basically Trump's Taiwan defense strategy in full. The problem is that his administration's approach has its own downfall built in. In this case, it is demanding answers of allies who it has been busy alienating with tariffs and questioned or broken agreements. The loss of trust of those allies, the impression they have that the US is unpredictable at best, wholly self-serving, that is a major erosion in deterrence, the exact deterrence that Trump is deeply relying on. Even if 10% does turn out to be enough and war is avoided, the damage being done to America's place in the world is probably irreversible and something that medium term will make China's hand a lot stronger when it chooses to play it. As far as Trump's concerned, so long as that comes once he's left office, he doesn't really mind at all.